Okay, the link is in board docs.
Good evening and welcome to the January 13th, 2025 Committee of a Whole meeting for the Hartford Board of Education. We're excited that you've joined us tonight. Tonight's meeting agenda includes a presentation by Dr. Stefan Hines from the Hartford Promise, and then a preliminary discussion on the draft strategic plan that we have been working on for the last several months. So with that, we're excited to have you, Dr. Hines, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for the invitation just to share a little bit about Hartford Promise. Want to be mindful of time because I could talk forever about it. So, just in a brief overview, and then wanted to talk about some specifics. But I think the whole point of my wanting to speak today is to have folks understand that Hartford Promise is an incredibly good news story for Hartford Public Schools that we would love everyone who is in Hartford and outside of Hartford to be aware of. And so just wanted to go over what I've been surprised at is how many people know a little bit, but very little about Hartford Promise. So the program was started 9.5 years ago by corporations, foundations, and some individual donors in an attempt to increase the college-going culture of Hartford students, right? And so the idea being that if you could increase the number of students who successfully attended and graduated college, you would increase or decrease the economic wealth disparity within Hartford. And so our scholarship is very simple in that the way it works is that you have to be a resident of Hartford, you have to attend a public school in Hartford for all 4 years. And so that includes currently the 11 HPS schools, plus the public charter Achievement First. You attend one of those schools, you graduate with a cumulative 3.0 or higher GPA and a 93% attendance rate. If you meet those criteria, you automatically get our scholarship, so students don't have to apply. We share data with Hartford Public Schools, so we know who's on track starting in 9th grade. And then what our scholarship is it is a $20,000 scholarship. It's up to $5,000 a year to attend any 4-year nonprofit college within the country. So you can go outside of Connecticut or you can choose to stay in Connecticut. You can also use our scholarship to attend community college, and then it becomes $2,500 a year instead of $5,000 a year. But what's really important about Hartford Promise is that we provide really deep wraparound services because our students reflect Hartford's population. So 90% are students of color, 75% are low income, 70 to 75% are first generation college students. And so if you're aware of national data, you can't just send particularly first generation students to college with some money and say good luck and expect them to succeed. Our goal is not just to have students start college, it is to have them finish college. So we are a large scale program for Hartford. So in 9.5 years, we've had over 1,100 students get our scholarship. And we have been remarkably successful due to the deep programming we have. So we have a team in high school that is working at all of those high schools, going in and helping students understand that they are on track, that they helping them with financial aid and FAFSA forms, applying to a wide range of colleges, helping them with essays, things like that. Our goal is, could we use this scholarship as incentive to get students to actually reach higher, have a greater attendance, greater academics? And what we've shown is when we started 9 years ago, 13% of students graduating qualified for the scholarship, meaning students who were Hartford residents and attending one of those schools. Now we are up to almost 25%. Was 24.7%. in this last year. So that we feel like we've been really successful at getting students excited about it. The second piece is, can they be successful in college? And we have an entire team that is working with students in college. Every student has an assigned coach who is reaching out to them proactively to say, how's it going? Oh, Jen, I'll pick on you, Jen. You failed your chemistry exam. Don't worry about it. That happens to many students, but let's talk about how we can plug you in to more support and help guide you through that. So we provide that kind of academic support, guidance around choosing your classes, extra financial help. My laptop dies. I have some kind of emergency, car battery, things like that, as well as trying to help students with mental health support. The result has been that we've been very successful in students persisting in college, running 86 to 89% are persisting into their second year, and we're at a 76% graduation rate. So when you talk about that compared to national numbers, regardless of whether you're first gen, we're running 20, 30% percentage points above. And what we are excited about is impact for Hartford and these good news stories. So we've had just now it's a little over 340 students graduate from college, all from Hartford, all from these schools in Hartford. We've been going back and talking to principals about the stories of those students, and we're now also helping them significantly with career, plugging them into opportunities, building pipelines with companies, healthcare systems, corporations, the school system, and then providing them mock interviews, resume work, et cetera, so that we're trying to build this whole huge picture. I prefer talking than just slides, but I will show you just one number piece. So if you look here, let's see, hopefully that will work. Let's see. I thought I could share. Let's see. There. Can you see that now? I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So just in terms of numbers, right? 338 college graduates. This was done a couple months ago. Over 500 students in college, 80 colleges and universities throughout the country. And when we talk about workforce, so the economic power of these students has been calculated by national numbers of what you can earn with a degree, college degree in Connecticut, as having $1.1 billion in estimated lifetime earnings. So the impact for Hartford, we feel like, is huge. And we just would love for more students, more families to understand this, and for Hartford and Hartford Public Schools to be telling that story, because it's really a very significant one. And I'm going to stop sharing that. We have more good news coming, but this is the overview of where we are now. And we're really excited about that. We have a small team, 13 people, but we're doing really great work in partnership. And I think the last thing I wanted to say too about that partnership is we do partner with a number of colleges who double our scholarship. So if you go to UConn, if you go to USJ, if you go to Eastern, if you go to Central, those schools, and there are a handful of others, the scholarship becomes twice as much. So it's $40,000. So it's a huge benefit to be attending one of these schools and to meet that criteria. So I said I was going to be really cognizant of time. So I did want to answer any questions that folks have about how the program works.
Thank you, Dr. Hine. Yeah, I'll open it up to the board members. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Excuse me, Dr. Hines. I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is still shaky. But congratulate you on the program. Um, so I was aware of the front end of it. I have a mentee who is a Harvard Promise Scholar now, who somehow enrolled in university here in the area. But what I did not know is those services you offer during college, because all the services you mentioned he needed. And um, I put a lot of energy into the situation, as well as all the universities. And like UConn has a lot of services on campus to provide, that mirrors that. But so I guess I want to know, one, how you're building awareness for the services that you offer while in college. Because obviously, because he's in college, you're dealing with him. I mean, he's a young adult, so it's not like the parent or mentee or others are really engaging it, right? The second question I would have, I can have a follow-up, is um, I guess I'm having thoughts or rumors that Harvard Promises will begin to create cohorts, because you're starting to get a critical mass of alum that I thought maybe will form cohorts and be able to actually help and assist the program, through their own success. And I don't know if that's something that's anticipated happening. So if you can answer those two questions. Thank you.
Sure. So the first one I would say, Tyrone, some of it might depend on when your mentee started college with us, because the program was always designed to say, hey, we're here for you and we will support you. But it was a really small team, four people, or maybe five. 2.5 years ago is when we built out this model where every single student had a coach. We have been doing what we call Promise Scholar Day, which is a kickoff before they head off to college, in which we tried to go over all of these services, we're here for you, etc. Some of the things I've changed. Promise Scholar Day is now mandatory. So you want your scholarship, you need to come to that day so that we can go over with you. We are reaching out to you. Do not ignore our calls. Now, do I have students who ignore some of them? Yes. Email, text, we try everything. Jump up and down in front of you, social media, etc. There's some students who are going to not respond, but I think the majority of them, particularly the last 2 or 3 years, do. It's a trust thing, right? Once they see that we are here for you and we're not going away and we can try and help solve one issue, you're much more likely to reach out to us for other things or to answer our calls, which is true for all of us. It'd be great if families knew more about our services too, because then they too might encourage, or mentors like you, their students about it. So we are trying to tell students from the beginning. Now that our high school work is also deeper, I believe there's more of a relationship there, and then the handoff to college, to our college team. So we call it reaching back, and that is the high school work reaching forward in college. The second question about alumni. So we have cohorts within the colleges now. Our alumni group is one that, again, we are working on building out. Several of our alumni work for us as coaches now. So one of the, both, we have 3 alumni of our program who are working as coaches or coordinators, one with the high school students, 2 with the college students. So that's really helpful. But also we have more and more who say they want to and are helping with, like, we just had a huge career fair at last week. We had 40 some employers and about 120 of our scholars who came. And that was a really successful event, and included some alumni trying to help those students as well. But
Yeah, thank you very much.
Other questions? So how you can help us then is just really making sure people know and sharing that information as much as possible. One of the things that's important is this does not apply if students choose outside school choice or CREC programs. So in 8th grade, we are trying to get to families to understand that the way it is set up right now, you do need to attend one of those 11 Hartford Public Schools, including the magnet schools, et cetera, or Achievement First. I see that's Mr. Wilson has a question too.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely would like to congratulate you on the success of the program. I don't really have a question more so than I have more of a testimony. My daughter is a Hartford Promise student. She currently is attending school out in California.
Taylor
And
Wilson, who is
yeah,
a dynamo in every way possible. You should be incredibly proud of her. She is.
I appreciate that. But I was very impressed with how the services provided to her, or the provided to her as she was looking for internships, helping her with mock interviews. I was there with her hand in hand, but the additional support to give her that confidence to go out and find some of the internships and jobs that she has while she's on out there in California has been very valuable to us. So I just want to attest that yes, the services being provided to the kids are well needed and they're phenomenal. So thank you.
Thank you. I will happily tell Clotilde, who's Taylor's coach, too. So.
I don't see any other questions. So Dr. Hines, thank you again for this presentation. And we truly hope to see you again in person with some scholars, maybe later on this year, as we continue to celebrate everything that you do. I do see Ms. Fortune.
Thank you. Not a question, but again, I wanted to echo what's been said. I attended a Hartford Promise event at my neighbor's house a few months back where Dr. Hines presented to us. And I first became more familiar with Hartford Promise. It's just a phenomenal program. I can't speak highly enough about it. And as someone who was also a first-gen college student and did not have family members who could guide me through that process, literally everything they said that they do is what I dreamed that I would have had. I was fortunate that I went to a school that did offer a lot of support, and a lot of the students were first-gen students, so I felt at home, but that's not most people's college experience. So it's such a phenomenal program. You know, if I hit the lottery, if I play the lottery and I ever win, I am making a large donation to Hartford Promise. It's just such great work.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you all. And
All right.
my
Oh,
contact information.
sorry. It looks like we've got one more straggler. Ms. Estelle Ledger.
Thank you so much. I apologize for my tardiness, but I wanted to say just not a question, but once again, kudos to Hartford Promise. I love seeing the videos. There was a recent video, Jordan Green, I believe, kind of videotaped some, like, you know, the students finding out that they received the scholarship and they got into colleges, and, you know, it was just, it's amazing. Like, it's just a great program, phenomenal program. And it really gives scholars, because they're all scholars, it gives the scholars an opportunity, and it gives them hope, and it gives them something to look forward to, which is really, really wonderful. So I just want to say you're doing awesome work, and I love how you highlight the students.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's an amazing amount of talent within these young people in Hartford. And it is a huge pleasure for my team to get to work with them all. Our goal is to make sure they recognize it and that everyone else recognizes it as well. So thank you.
Thanks again, Dr. Hines. Have a great night. All right. Next up is discussion around the draft strategic planning process. Dr. Torres Rodriguez, are you going to kick us off?
I'm actually just going to do a very, very quick introduction to our partners at Columbia Center for Public Research and Leadership. And I'm so excited that we're going to get a update as to not only the process, but what we have heard and how the feedback and the co-creation continues to evolve and morph and shape. And also, while we're here, just CPRL team, also thank you for your responsiveness to a process that we, imagined together, but has evolved as we have continued to move along, not only in interacting with us internally, with the internal team, but also with our board, given that the board has had a lot of feedback, not only in terms of process, but also in terms of content. So I just wanted to, before you kick off, just thank you for being responsive. And now turning it over to Liz Chu.
Thank you, and we are excited to be joining you tonight. Good evening, all, Chair, Vice Chair, all distinguished members of the Board of Education, the Superintendent, of course, thank you for those kind words. The community, a number of the central office team are here. I'm really excited to be here this evening to talk about where we are with the strategic planning process, get your feedback on some of the draft strategic priorities and objectives, and preview what's ahead for the next month-ish as we work toward a complete and final plan. So just as a reminder, so my name is Liz. I am the Executive Director at CPRL. We're the Center for Public Research and Leadership at Columbia. I've met many of you before. I'm joined tonight by my colleague that you all know well too, Andrea Clay. She and I will be doing tonight's presentation. As a reminder, we are an education, research, leadership, and policy center. We're housed at Columbia University. So we work nationally. We do tons and tons of work in Connecticut. I think first because we're next door neighbors, and then just because we love your state. And all of our work is driven by participatory processes that really bring people together to make strong decisions about what is best for their kids, families, communities. And so excited to be going through that with all of you. We are excited tonight, if you go to the next slide, Andrea, to share some updates about where we've been. And some of these are going to be process updates just so that we have a chance to brief you all on the work that we've been doing since we last came together. I know we've been touching base with the chair and some others on the board more frequently, but as a whole group sort of to describe some of our activities. And then we're going to look at some of the content that's in draft form to talk and get your feedback about that before we move any further. So All Voices Our Future, as you know, we kicked this off late in the summer. We first had a phase 0 where we met with all of you. We met with some other folks at the central office. We reviewed a ton of documents about the district to design the process ahead and to really think about the vision, the values, the key actions that it would take to come to a really strong strategic plan together as one community. We used all of that input going into phase 1, where the goal was to be really open-ended and to gather folks' thoughts and ideas about what they wanted to be true for Hartford Public Schools, both at a high level so that we can think at the vision level and in very concrete terms to better understand what we would need to do as a district over the next 3 years in order to help all of our kids, families, and communities succeed. And we wrapped that up in November. And in this last phase, we're now in phase 2, where instead of going broad and getting more and more ideas, we're starting to focus and say of all of the ideas that we've heard, of all of the evidence that we've looked at, matching those ideas up to the evidence base about what works in districts. And when we look at similar districts, of course, no district is the same, but as we look at similar districts and schools across the country, what we're seeing, what are some very concrete ideas that might make it into Hartford's strategic plan, and what feedback do folks have on those ideas? That's where we are tonight. This is a phase 2 event where we'll be sharing some of that draft content with all of you and getting your feedback before we move any further. I'm only guessing that as board members, you might have some questions about the numbers. You know, who have you talked to? What have you heard? We put at a high level some of that data on this slide just so you can get a sense of that. We've had a few thousand people engaged. Over 2,600 have done that through surveys. We've conducted a number of one-to-one conversations. We've conducted many focus groups, and then we've been attending various events. You know, we had a chance to go out to conferences, for example. We've been to weekly morning meetings and many other types of events across the community. It's been really wonderful to hear everything that your community has to say about the future of their schools. I will say that we've been tracking in much more detail, sort of, you know, are we talking to enough students, teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And so far, we're having pretty good spread across lots of different community groups. We're keeping our eye on that as we go throughout phase 2. In phase 2, we have a number of events in addition to this one to get a chance for folks to weigh in on the ideas that we're really focusing on in this last phase of the work. And at the very end of today's presentation, we'll put up a QR code with a link to the phase 2 survey. We're still collecting survey responses here, but really at this point, it's more feedback on the ideas that we're focusing on, as opposed to going broad and asking broadly what are folks interested in happening in Hartford Public Schools. We move forward one slide. So with all of that, we are now at the point where we are just drafting 2 key parts of the strategic plan, the strategic priorities and the strategic objectives. And we want to share those in draft form with you all tonight to get your thoughts on them. I will say there's a lot of meaty content in here. And so we are happy to, after this meeting, get additional feedback through email, by having conversations with all of you, all of those sorts of things, with the idea that after today's meeting, and with all of the feedback that we continue to get through the events and the surveys and other phase 2 things that we're having, that will bring out a more full plan to you. One step further along the completion continuum when we have our board retreat at the end of the month, and then we'll continue to have the full plan with the goals, outcomes, milestones, year-over-year activities by the February board vote. So again, today's focus, we're really hoping to preview those strategic priorities and objectives, make sure you understand after the meeting, if you want to spend more time with them, sort of how to read the documents that we're sharing and getting your feedback first tonight. And then, like I said, there's a lot in there. So we welcome follow-up conversations for additional feedback. And I too, Mr. Walker, am recovering from a cold, so I'm gonna mute 1 second and just excuse me. Okay, great. Andrea, if we move ahead. So here's just a refresher of the Hartford Public Schools mission and vision. I think this is really important because you all have sort of said how critical it is that your mission is to provide all your students with the learning and support they need to succeed in life, and with the idea that all students are going to be prepared to transform the world. With that big idea in mind, the next thing we wanted to share is the strategic approach. And one of the things that we heard across our many conversations was a real desire for folks to engage in frank and authentic conversations about how to bring that mission and vision to life. I think this is also a theme that came through loud and clear, starting with the first board meeting that we had designing this process, is really a commitment to actualizing this and a commitment to real grounded conversations about how to make sure this can be true. And so the various community members, folks in the central office, in the schools, you all said, you know, we need to be real about the situation of our schools, the financial situation, the context that we're working in. So we don't want to design sort of in this ideal state. We want to design for our reality so that we can succeed. And we really took that to heart. And so here, what we heard across is this idea that we don't want to do lots of bits and pieces of things in a way that is at a footprint that is not manageable, and it's sort of all over the place. And so doing all of those things to quality is not manageable, but we really want to focus on high quality activities at a footprint that is right to serve all of our students well. And so here we are trying to say that some of the key ideas in terms of the approach are prioritizing and strengthening the core, making sure there's a lot of coordination, and exploring new and innovative ideas through focused pilots and through taking on levels of innovation that are responsible while you're making sure you're delivering the fundamentals well. So that's the strategic approach that's going to guide, when you see what's next, the strategic priorities and objectives that we'll share. Andrew, if you want to go to the next slide. Great. You're a step ahead of me. Okay, so we've organized in terms of the content as it stands. This is the one overview slide, and then there are going to be a set of slides that go into more detail for each of the strategic priorities. But this is the one pager as it stands. So at the heart of it, unsurprisingly, this was at the heart of what came out in our first board retreat, are students. Isn't that wonderful? So we heard loud and clear that students have to be the cornerstone of the work, and that whole and healthy students, nurturing the whole student, their academic, their personal, their mental, their social, their physical selves, in school, out of school, is what is at the center of all of the work that you do. So whether you want to think of it as like I said, the cornerstone, the center of the wheel, the heart of the work, it's why this particular strategic priority is at the top with those strategic objectives. And then below those, you'll see 3 additional strategic priorities: expansive learning and opportunity, skilled and diverse teams, and operational efficiency. Those were 3 things that came up repeatedly as strategic pillars that you all would have to deliver on in order to make sure that you have whole and healthy students. You're making sure that the students are coming first in everything that you do. We are going to go into these in detail, like I said, but I'm just going to pause for 1 minute so that you can take a look at what's on the screen, because this is the snapshot of where we are. Okay, so you'll see for whole and healthy students, like I said, this is about nurturing the whole student. The strategic objectives 1 through 5 focus on mental health, high quality instruction, strong pathways for all students from early childhood to college and career, targeting the focus on students with the most needs, and including students with disabilities and multilingual learners, and finally, opportunities to pilot innovation across. In this second category, into the support of strategic priorities, expansive learning and opportunity. This is really focused on partnerships across the Hartford community that will allow you to provide students with the real world and enriching experiences, those trusting and collaborative relationships that we know are so important to students, families, and to all of you. So the strategic objectives in here include those open, transparent, accessible communications, fostering that trust and collaborative relationships with all of those partners, and real-world experiences and enrichment. The third is the skilled and diverse teams. It's all about keeping, developing the talent into the school system itself so that they can benefit our students. And so we have strategic objectives here about honoring the experiences, the interests, the talents of our educators, providing that differentiated professional learning. We're talking about recruitment, thinking through strengthened recruitment pipelines and retention practices, and improving hiring itself. And lastly, operational efficiency, thinking very much here about how to use the available resources in the most effective ways to effectuate the strategic plan and provide those high quality services to our students. And so here you'll see content around managing resources equitably and strategically, engaging in legislative advocacy for policy changes and increased funding, improving management at all levels of the system, and lastly, delivering on the strategic plan itself. We can take a pause here. I see there's one hand. Chairperson, do you want us to pause as we go throughout? However you want to handle it is totally fine with us.
Sure. Yeah, we can pause here for a minute before we go into detail. Ms. Brody?
Hi, good evening, everyone. What some of the things that maybe I've struggled with ongoing, and it was more so as a parent years ago, we do have gifted students in some kind of way. We have to incorporate them. They have to be shown like they are also a priority. Because I do see a lot of high quality grade level. We have students who are above grade level. We have a gifted and talented middle school, but not all of our high achievers are in the middle school. So I don't know how we're able to make that a priority. But I just think it should be a priority.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful and a good example of the exact type of feedback that we're hoping to get this evening. So really appreciate that. And that is something that, of course, we heard from lots of families, which I think is a good push here. It's making sure you're sort of meeting each child and pushing them, within their zone of proximal development. Not the word we'll put in this, but sort of meeting their, pushing them as much as is appropriate to help them get as far as they can possibly go. So I really appreciate that. Superintendent, I don't know if there's anything you want to add in response to that comment before we move forward.
I think reflecting on the language here, while the objective is high quality grade level instruction, I'm wondering if in expansive learning opportunity, could it be captured there as we're thinking about enrichment? I also understand that enrichment can mean different things to different people, and so we'll probably have to think about to address what Ms. Brody is saying, the entire continuum of students, their needs as well. So that's what comes to mind immediately.
Definitely. Thank you both. Any other questions or comments before we go into more detail for each of the strategic priorities? Okay, well then, Andrea, over to you.
Thanks, Liz. So as Liz mentioned, while our focus is on the objectives and priorities for today, it can be helpful to see some of the additional detail and to really sort of start to unpack some of what the objectives describe at a higher level. So again, just to orient, along the left are those same objectives you just saw on that one pager, but now to the right side, you can see some actions that align with each. And sort of at the advice of the chair, I'm going to highlight a few and give you all a chance to digest these today during this meeting and then over the coming days. And again, invite you to reach out to us or either during this meeting or after for further conversation. We've had some time to sit with it. But when we're looking at the first priority, whole and healthy students, if we even just zoomed in on that first strategic objective about students' mental health, you'll see in the action some additional detail about counseling, for example, virtual and in-person, access to various types of enrichment, after-school activities, students as leaders and true collaborators in their own learning, that each of these things might better support students' health holistically. And these, of course, align with effective practices and research, but as you'll see on the next slide, and every one of these priorities has a slide like this, they also align with what we heard directly from community members. So let's take a look. at some of what we heard. These are just some illustrative quotes that speak to some of the objectives and the actions included for each priority. So here across these quotes, each of them coming from a different type of member of the Hartford community, you see repeatedly this focus on students with the highest levels of need and students' connectedness to school. Really prioritizing their access to programming that, no matter their needs or their skill level or their backgrounds, would make school feel engaging to them and interesting. And some specific ideas highlighted are extracurriculars, are the arts, are these real world learning experiences. And so, showing you all these quotes, the direct voices of community members and how they align with those strategic objectives and actions, hopefully paints a fuller picture for you. We'll go to the next one. I think unless we move at a more slower pace, just in case you're reading some more of these quotes, but we'll go on to expansive learning and opportunity. And here I'd like to highlight, I think Liz spoke to this, but the importance of community partnerships. We spoke to so many folks who were leaders of community organizations, beneficiaries of the wraparound services, educators in schools, where there were really strong community partnerships, educators in schools where they wish there were even stronger community partnerships. And so, one thing to call out here is just how much community shows up, and those partnerships show up as a critical ingredient to expand the learning for students. And really, throughout, you can see that the learning can be as expansive as those community relationships that help provide them. And it's through this collaboration and service that a lot of trust grows and strengthens. And so we heard folks wanting to build relationship and trust really around this kind of partnership, around this service to students and community. So we'll take a look again at some of the direct words from community members on this topic, which again echo those sentiments. There's a clear nexus between the community partnerships and this desire to provide more extensive support to students. That is like the focus, just as much as whole and healthy students is the cornerstone of the strategic priorities. Having those partnerships to serve students is the entire point. And in particular, the community highlighted experiential learning and real world experiences as places where these partnerships could really help add to what Hartford Public Schools already offers. There's also a real emphasis on practical life after graduation, from both a skills perspective and also from an exposure perspective, giving students an idea of what's out there for them, so they may aspire to something they might not be reading about in a textbook or seeing day to day in their community, but that they might with some expanded partnerships. So again, I will linger here for a moment in case you're still catching up on some of the quotes before going to the next priority, which is all about skilled and diverse teams. And wow, we heard so much about the importance of this. And I know this was just a really important issue for the community members we spoke to. There were some more common ideas about compensation and about the hiring process and just improving the efficiency there. But people also mentioned, every time we said whole and healthy students, there were a number of folks who mentioned whole and healthy adults. And so you'll see here some of that culture of respect and warmth and welcome echoed. The idea that the adults who are sort of charged with the care and education of the students also feel valued and empowered, and as a result feel better able to provide high quality learning experiences to students. Here's some of the community words on this topic. Really focusing on making Hartford Public Schools an attractive place to work for educators through myriad strategies, whether that be through compensation or acknowledging the differentiated experiences and skill sets that they bring to the table, and making sure professional learning reflects that. And being able to see a growth path, being able to see what it is to be a first year teacher, a fifth year and a 10th year, to become a mentor, to become a school leader. really sort of mapping that arc out for them. So you can see all of this showing up in the sort of finding talent, retaining talent, and developing talent in the skilled and diverse teams. Finally, as I linger one more moment, on operational efficiency. Here, I know we talked in the one pager a bit about advocacy, but I think that would be a place to draw your attention, at least for tonight's session, particularly because I know last week you all discussed some legislative priorities. And so here are a list of, in the actions, you'll see some additional priorities reflected as far as both the policies that might be advocated for at the state level, as well as investments or increased funding, and what those investments might go towards. In addition to sort of that legislative advocacy, much of operational efficiency relates to sort of internal operations, finding places where things can be more streamlined, where they can work more smoothly, where there's room to learn where things are not working smoothly, or where they're not streamlined, and to address those. And then, yeah, I'll pause there because I'm not going through the whole slide. But just to see what the community, hopefully that passes. Here we go. Okay, perfect. Some really apt quotes here. Really, again, focusing on what Liz spoke about in that strategic approach, which is that this operational efficiency in many ways is about targeting and focusing on a set of core actions, finding that right size footprint to get really great, and focusing on being sort of intentional and targeted to build from a strong foundation. So you can see that throughout these quotes, less is more, can build a castle on shifting sand. And I think this speaks again, it's almost a full circle moment to some of that, the aspects of that strategic approach that really, focus on foundations while also leaving room for targeted innovations. So again, I invite you all to spend more time, of course, during this meeting. It's a ton of content. So over the coming days, spend more time with these quotes and these actions. But again, on the recommendation of our chairperson, we'll move on at this point to just take another look at what Liz highlighted, which is all the content to come that we're looking forward to discussing with you all during the board retreat. And you'll see on this slide as well a QR code that'll take you, anybody who's accessing this on YouTube, to the link tree where you can take that phase 2 survey, and for those same actions or objectives rather and priorities we went through, rank them according to your perspective of how important, their relative importance to one another. We've been tracking that and are just continuing to reflect on the community feedback, even as we continue drafting the plan. And there's also an opportunity for you all, of course, but for anybody in the community to sign up for one-on-ones. We've been doing that throughout their 20-minute Zoom sessions. And so if you're a verbal processor, would like to chat with us, invite you to use that QR code and access the link to sign up. So with that, I believe I'm going to pass it back to the chair for a question discussion section. And yeah, thank you all for letting us share this with you and for your engagement.
Thanks, Liz and Andrea. This is really great information, and I appreciate all the looking back as to what we've done, and really look forward to our processing this all together later on this month. But I will open it up to the board members if there's anything you wanted to discuss tonight. Have any questions, feedback, comments? Certainly a lot of information, and I think it will take us some time to process it for sure. Mr. Tatum?
Thank you very much, and I certainly commend the CPRL team for all the work of sifting through the information from our community, and I think that this is a great draft with some really excellent goals. Looking at the priorities, as far as feedback on the priorities, I think they're pretty solid. and the objectives do, to my mind, a pretty good job of sort of getting that one level deeper in terms of defining what that means and what it would really take to achieve, for example, whole and healthy students. I had a couple like comments or questions on some particular points, but I can save that for an email. I think what I'd like to ask about and maybe provide some feedback on is the strategic approach as it's articulated here of scaling down to optimize. When I first read that, it didn't immediately sit very well with me because it doesn't sound, very inspiring. It sounds like scaling down, like I'm not sure if I want to, be part of a system that's scaling down. And as I was trying to unpack, like, why was that my reaction? I think one of the sort of frank conversations that we need to have is like, when is it really strategic to scale down from the perspective of fulfilling our mission of providing students with the support that they need to succeed and, fulfill the vision of them being able to transform the world? Like, when will scaling down help us do that better? And when are we needing to scale down because of financial realities? Like, those two things, although like in the end, it might be right that like in order to do this, in order to do our mission well, we have to, because of financial realities, scale down. To me, it's that's a very different move than, even with all the resources available, it would still make sense to scale down to provide a better education. So I want us to be like very upfront about that as a baseline of like, is this a question of limited resources that's forcing the scale down? Or is this primarily a question of delivering the best services and trying, I get that it might be hard to tease that out, but trying to tease that out, I think, will be really important as we communicate with our community, and also really important as we engage in that legislative advocacy for more resources. Because, you could look at Hartford from the outside and say, oh, look, like they don't need any more money. They've already recognized that they need to scale down in order to do their best effectively. Like they're managing their resources as best they can. Like, no, that's not what we want to be saying, right? The state has the money. There has been a budget surplus of billions of dollars over the last several years. Like, we don't need to telegram that idea at all. So I don't know what to do with that kind of reaction or feedback, but that was just some of my thoughts on the strategic approach and like, where is it coming from? What is it? In what way is it strategic? Just trying to be clear about that as we work on this.
Thank you. Superintendent, do you want to? I'm happy to respond, but I don't know if you want to respond.
You can respond, and then I'll share a few of the conversations that I have relative to this. It's not representative of the entire 2,600 voices, but perhaps I can share what I've heard after you, Liz.
Yeah, sure. I think it's really helpful because you're right that you can think about this from multiple ways, and we were thinking about it from both of those ways. I will say, one of the things that we've seen in a number of districts that have really, put themselves on strong trajectories for improvement is sort of cutting out the activity that isn't doing the best for kids to focus on sort of like the most important stuff. One of the examples, I'm not sure how much this will resonate with all of you, but I know for a lot of districts that are really trying to make sure that they're using evidence-based instructional approaches, they're trying to get all the stuff that isn't evidence-based out of their classrooms and out of their after school and out of a lot of things, just to make sure you're sort of like really focusing. on what is going to make the biggest difference for kids, and doing that at the highest level of excellence as possible, which is just easier too from an operational and from a human standpoint, because instead of having to figure out how to do sort of like 150 things like kind of well, you can figure out how to do a smaller set of things really, really, really well in ways that are well matched to each particular child or student's needs. So there's some of that. And then of course, there's also sort of the fiscal reality. We, at this particular iteration, I'll say from more of a strategic planning document and process point of view, we wanted to sort of like speak in clear terms to make sure everyone was on the same page. I don't know that this is the right framing. Like in hearing you talk right now, like I think there's probably some language changes that we should make when we bring this back for a future iteration. But it's helpful to get on the same page and then think about how you want to talk about these things, if this is in fact where you all do want to land with the content and approach. And I actually think in looking at other places, it's actually a very optimistic approach, really. And so I think that's ultimately, how we want it to feel when people receive it. Because what we're really saying across the two scenarios that you described is how can we sort of like rebuild our district to do the best things really well for each kid. That's really what it's saying, as opposed to sort of continuing to do, and you can think about this in sort of every single way, continuing to like do all the things that have been added on over the years, just because they're part of the system, even if they're not really making a difference for the kids in our schools.
Yeah, if I could just respond briefly, like I'm 100% behind like that line of thinking, and I think I noticed sort of a mismatch between the strategic approach, and maybe it is just a language thing, and the priorities and the objectives. Like those two things didn't seem to line up for me, at least in terms of how they were being talked about. But I definitely resonate with the idea of, maybe if not scaling down, like trying to do less, or I don't know if doing less is the right word either, because that doesn't sound great either. But yeah, honing the focus or something. That way of sort of understanding the approach resonates much better with me.
I think the only other thing that I'll add is one of the conversations that I was listening to relative to making sure that what stays on the plate are the highest leverage, research aligned, right, strategies and or supports. We were talking that the conversations around conditions for students to be successful and our adults, right, to be successful. The one thing that I heard in the conversation, and these were teachers, our educators saying, right, so we know that this is our fiscal reality. We also know that there are too many things on the plate, but we also know that we want some opportunity to have some type of autonomy. And it was being described in a way that prompted our teachers to wonder, well, if we do have the autonomy, will we have the support? Because it's not something that all schools can potentially engage in. So that was a walk away, something that I walked away with in, yes, we want to prioritize. I don't even want to say limit. We want to prioritize what stays on the plate and allow for opportunity to either innovate or have some autonomy in some areas, while being mindful that will we have the supports necessary for our educators to explore, innovate, pilot. Is the one thing that didn't necessarily come out in this presentation. And mind you, it was one conversation that I heard, but it almost kind of brought all of these things together. That yes, minimal priorities, but also interest in some opportunity. So how do you honor all of that?
We'll find a way. It's the answer. We'll take that too.
And I think if I'm right, this group will meet again tomorrow evening to talk about some of the budget process. So we'll have more opportunity for some of that confronting, at least, for me as a newer board member, like get a better grasp on the financial realities so that I feel like I can navigate around those conversations better. So more to come.
And I'll say briefly to that, we want these processes to feel deeply connected. And so we're hoping that from this conversation, we can flow it into the budgeting piece to say, yeah, how does our fiscal reality shape the planning we need to do? But also out of these priorities, what does that mean in our budget? And how do we connect that to resourcing? So glad you said that.
Other questions, discussion? Superintendent, was there anything else you wanted to add around this?
Yeah, actually there was I don't know which slide it was that I saw the word consolidate. Maybe it was here on the student. So I wanted to just hear a little more. I know that in the spaces and conversations that I was in, right, that was a resonating theme. And in speaking with the CPRL team, I also heard that it was a theme among different groups. So I just wanted to hear a little more, and just to be transparent as to where my inquiry is coming from, knowing that we've done some of this work before, and there are, I think, a lot of assumptions around what the outcome of consolidation could be. So I'm curious what you heard from which groups, the prevalence, and then yeah, I'll pause on that. I'll pause there for now.
Thanks. Yes. So if I'm understanding the question, it's over the course of our conversations with folks, which community member types sort of across. Okay. Yeah. I'd say this is across groups, yeah, we heard it across groups. It was a consistent theme. It really was another version of the getting the foundations right. And folks, I think, made a conclusion that having less going on, and being able to consolidate and coordinate resources was one way to address that. Across groups, the sort of financial context was top of mind. Across groups, the experience of being in schools that didn't have enough staff or had low enrollment was something we heard. And in some of those conversations or in some of those entries, we also heard consolidation as a potential way to address that.
Okay, that's helpful. I worry that the understanding is that, right, a consolidation will mean financial sustainability challenges will be gone, and right, it's not that, right? We've done hard work. I mean, consolidating 20%, of our footprint was what we did over 3 years, and there were opportunities, fiscal opportunities, and we were able to reinvest and have grade level time for educators, things that weren't there before. That's a yes. However, it didn't address, right, our structural financial challenges. So I just want to be I want to understand where it's coming from. I don't want to make any assumptions. And I wonder if it means that we have to rethink if we have to create an opportunity for our community to just learn a little more about our previous experience and the outcomes or what it is that we were able to do and not do as a result of consolidation, if that is an expectation for continued conversation and action from the board. Meaning if that is an expectation that community has for board action.
Yes, and maybe I can just let you know a little bit more context about the across the groups where we heard that it never was a singular approach. So to I think to what your statements are right now, Superintendent, it was never, that was the only approach that was offered. But at the same time, I think sharing about previous experiences is always a great idea. Just hearing about generally for this plan, for previous plans, that was another theme we heard, was being able to know sort of what happened and what was implemented and what was the result. Some of that transparency was also there, and so that feels right in line with that. Sorry, I know I saw a hand, so I'll mute myself.
Mr. Walker, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant because this is a good discussion, and I'm wondering if we'll be able to continue this at the retreat or whatnot, with more digesting. But if I guess a comment and I guess a question is the consolidating. It's really unclear to me that consolidation saved us any money. I'm trying to, and so if it really does, I would invite, I guess, to the superintendent or to the CPRO folks to really produce kind of some compelling charts that really shows that consolidation somehow frees up a lot of financial opportunity. And what I'm saying in my head, when I think about a couple schools, if I take 350 students and 425 students to combine them into a single building, I have like 800 students or something who will need almost the same number of staff and a similar number of administrators. And I am questioning if just, eradicating one building saves us so much money in terms of, when I know that, our big driver cost-wise is staff salary. I mean, the students will. So if you see what I'm saying, consolidating schools doesn't reduce any instructional capability or need even, right? So I'm just saying that that's one issue. Now, where I do see consolidation having some benefit is in this area of shared resources. We do have situations where I cannot have an orchestra because at 375 students, I can't justify it. If I took 375 and 425 and put them together to meet 800 students, I may have enough runway to say at 800 students, I can actually afford a full-time band instructor. And I can actually afford to have a school orchestra because I have 800 students. And so the per capita charges and fees around that may make it such that certain shared resources I could have at a slightly larger school. And so while maybe not saving money, there may be some programming benefit to taking two smaller schools and making them one larger school in terms of offering the students some shared experiences they could not have in their small school. And that's not a cost saving, but that's an actual benefit that I may be able to convince people that's worth doing. So that's why I just wanted to really think about what consolidation really brings us from a benefit standpoint. That's it in terms of just comment, and what we could talk about more at a retreat.
Mr. Walker, Ms. Brody.
Let me get off of these headphones. Okay. So whenever we're even, can you guys hear me clearly? Okay, because I went off of my whenever we say consolidation, just know that is the nightmare of community. So it's never anything easy. I don't think anyone on this board was a part of our last how I didn't really call that a real consolidation, but it was sort of, and it is traumatizing to our community. So I don't want, because it seems like we're talking about it lightly, but it is a very heavy thing. If you go back and look at those hearings that we had at the schools that we were closing, it made you did not sleep well. So I just want to put that out there, that is the number one thing that the community is afraid of. And we have, and one thing that Mr. Walker just said, I think we have been very creative in the way that we've had you'll have just like how you do it in the school. You have one person, they're working with students in this school, and then they're working with students in that school. And then when it comes to getting them together for like a unit, like I don't want to say a band, but say there have been things that I think we've done well, where a staff member has engaged more than one school and it comes together beautifully. Because I don't know that that's a cost saving. I think the schools, the smaller schools that we carry in ways that nobody can see, it's not a staff person, it's programming that the district has to fund because that school does not have enough students to bring in that type of budget for certain things that I believe, Superintendent, maybe out of your budget, you have to compensate for those schools. So it's the things that no one really can see that's very expensive to run a small school, but central office for the most part sees it, with just trying to make them have those basic things that they should have when the students don't bring that amount of funding to have those things. But just know, yes, because closing the school is the community's number one. They're scared, which is under construction. Do you know how many people are like people who are not engaged whatsoever seeking me out? Like, what is going on with that school? Because they're not plugged in to know it's renovated, but they are scared. Like, oh, is it going to close? And because they know, you know, an empty building, school building sitting in your community, it just is not a good look. And for people who live in Northeast, it's two school buildings in our neighborhood that are closed. It's vacant. Is not a good feeling. So I just want to know, when we have to make decisions, we have made them in the past. I'm not saying consolidation is one of them, but just know what that means to our community, especially communities that are kind of the least paid attention to communities in Hartford to begin with. So I just wanted to ground that.
can reply, or sorry, I'd like to raise my hand. I'm messing with the protocol. I'm so sorry. I think both of these points are really great ones. So thank you, Mr. Walker and Ms. Brody for the additional context. We actually were able to hear some similar feedback, and I think both of you are mentioning there is an interest or a need to be able to more efficiently use resources, and that the sort of ward consolidation or closure might bring up a lot of well, definitely will bring up a lot of fear and past experience. And it's for that reason, I believe, if I go to the previous slide, which let me see, in the plan itself, so we were just looking at a community member quote, but in the plan itself, we had adjusted to addressing some of these underutilized and under-enrolled schools and programs, small schools, et cetera, with feedback due to some feedback. And so that leaves hopefully open that door for some of the ideas that you both shared, and also for community members to really be heard on that issue. But I don't want to say that to shut down the conversation, more so to just clarify, I think, where the word consolidate appears in the community member's voice, but where or how it's stated, or how addressing under-enrolled schools and programs is represented in the draft. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and Ms. Brody. Thank you for that. It's always really helpful to hear past experiences and really to understand, if we do have conversations what we're up against. So really do appreciate that perspective. I am wondering, kind of on the flip side, and I don't know, maybe this is just crazy, but if we ever talk about what do we do to increase the enrollment in our schools? Is there a way to bring back students to our schools? I continue to say, I think Hartford Schools has a PR problem more than anything. I go into these schools and I see what's offered to students, and I just think that the programs that we offer are extraordinary, and I think it's about getting that information out. So no, I don't know that that's for a discussion tonight, but as we're having this conversation, I just wonder if that's something that can be folded into this or another discussion. Yeah, go, Superintendent.
I think I wanted to link your comment, Chairperson, to the conversation I was referencing earlier from our educators that were saying, well, if we innovate and if we do a couple things differently, that's our way that we can, right? Can we bring students back in? So it's, yes, taking things off the plate to leave the most, the highest leverage programming strategies, but where's the space to draw families and or students?
Right. Any other comments on the strategic plan for tonight, knowing that we will talk again about it at the end of it? Okay. Seeing no more hands. Superintendent, I was wondering if you wanted to, you had a very busy day today in Hartford. Was there anything you wanted to highlight before we end our call today on any of the many events you did at the Capitol?
Yes, it was an eventful day, and we did have a joint multi-city press conference with five at the top, the big five, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, Hartford, and Bridgeport. No, I said Bridgeport already. Five cities, and mayors and superintendents. Stanford, yes, Stanford with Dr. Lucera. We came together and we were having a unified approach to making sure that people understand the needs that we have relative to funding. Specifically for us, Mayor Arulampala and I focused on our special education funding and advocating for fully funding that grant. I know that other districts also spoke about ECS and additional funding streams, but I think the one that kind of cut across was highlighting some of the recommendations from the 119K Commission, which for us, right, would not only address the weights for these students that need the additional supports, like special education students, multilingual learners, and or supports for wraparound services. I think this is the first time, as I hear from not just my colleagues, but from others at the legislature, that the 5 cities come together to talk about their needs, given that we have a shared challenges right now relative to staffing, being limited relative to local funding opportunities, and then obviously the state funding. And then a few hours later, I joined Chairperson Hockenhall and Dr. Hoffman from representing our special education department. We met with a delegation to also speak about the legislative priorities. And there was, and Chair Hockenhall, you can share your perspective, but it was a intent. Our delegation was intently not just listening, but also engaging in problem solving around how they could support what they're hearing. And both in the shared press conference and in our Hartford specific meeting with our delegation, I walked away with a lot of hope, actually, that there will potentially be some sort of action taken at the state and legislature relative to special education, at least. And so that was refreshing. I know that we have follow-up to provide relative to some specific data points for Hartford Public Schools. And Representative Khan specifically expressed interest in having follow-up conversations about our programming and opportunities for expansion, which we are interested in, but we would need some funding from the state to do that. So those are my takeaways. Chair Hockenhall, I don't know if you have anything else that you kind of saw that I didn't see, but.
No, I echo what the superintendent said. It was really energizing. This is, as many of you know, this is new space for me. I don't never really been these conversations, but I definitely walked away feeling very hopeful that at least, they asked the great questions. They were very, very engaged. So yeah, very hopeful is really, I guess, how I would summarize kind of what I walked away feeling.
And I'll thank Speaker Ritter, Senator McQuarrie, Representative Khan, Representative Sanchez, Representative Hall that joined us today. And obviously the other delegates, the other representatives had other commitments, but they will be following up with us. And of course, thanking our team internally that, was part of the legislative committee work, but also our partners at Capital Strategies, Pat McCabe and Nicole, who, of course, have been engaging when we're not at the LOB. They do all the work in between.
Thank you. I will wrap it up just by reminding everyone to please provide any feedback to Andrea and Liz before our retreat at the end of the month. Reach out if you want to have any kind of one-on-one conversations as well, or just feel free to email the information back. But really looking forward to digging into this information together in a few weeks. Thank you so much, Andrea and Liz, for your time and effort that you've put into this. Really grateful. I think it's going to really help move us forward, move us in the right direction. So, and thank you to all my fellow board members for all the work that you've put in and for all the work that we have yet to do to finalize this. And as always, thank you, Superintendent, and to your staff. And thank you to the viewing public. I think with that, this concludes the meeting, and I will see you all tomorrow.